Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a world of wool skirts, bread ovens, and candlelit kitchens. Forget what YouTube keeps selling you about dungeons, death, and despair. Yes, the Middle Ages had their hard edges but tucked between the plagues and punishments, were unexpected joys, quiet triumphs, and moments of pure, stubborn beauty. So let's begin where history books rarely linger, in the soft, glowing corners of the surprisingly wonderful lives of medieval women. So, before you get too cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. The air is velvet and hush, wrapped in the final threads of night. You wake slowly, without panic or purpose, your body nested in the scratchy luxury of tightly woven wool sheets and the gentle dip of your straw mattress. The rooster hasn't found his voice yet. The fire in the hearth is long cold. Outside the shutters, the sky holds the dense indigo of almost morning, and for now, there is no sound but the breath you take in and the one you let out. Your arms stretch above your head, joints popping in that satisfying way that says you've slept well, fully, without interruption. No babies crying, no husband elbowing you for warmth, no one barging in with a crisis about goats or gravy. You blink at the ceiling and smile, not because anything spectacular has happened, but because nothing at all is happening. And that is spectacular enough. You shift under the covers, savoring the quiet weight of the quilt that smells faintly of summer herbs. A bit of rosemary from last harvest, maybe. Or dried mint, tucked in with the wool to keep the moths and unpleasant thoughts at bay. The fibers itch, yes, but in the same way, fresh bread sometimes stings your fingers when it's too warm to touch. Comfort isn't always smooth. Sometimes it's textured and earned. In the loft beside you, your sister snores gently, lips parted, dreaming of whatever mischief she found in the last tavern ballad. You envy her sometimes, her knack for charm, her wicked timing with a joke. But right now, you feel no competition, only gratitude. You love her best like this, unconscious, uninvolved, and completely unaware that you've claimed this rare and sacred hour before dawn as yours alone. You sit up slowly. No rush, no bustle. The cold hits your skin and wakes you fully. A small bracing slap that reminds you you're alive and capable. You wrap your shawl around your shoulders, thick and worn but heavy with memory. Your mother's stitching crosses the hem. You run your thumb along the thread like a prayer. Down the ladder, your feet find the wood floor without creak. Years of practice. You move through your own house like a ghost, but not the kind that haunts, the kind that guards, that listens, that claims the silence and holds it close. In the kitchen, your hands move without need for thought. You ladle water from the barrel into a small basin. The surface shivers, catching the light from a single candle stub you lit with care. You dip the corner of a clean cloth and bring it to your face. It is cold, then cold again, then perfect. You press it to your eyelids, your cheeks, the back of your neck. You don't rush this either. No one's waiting for you to hurry. And even if they were, they'd wait longer. You glance at the door, closed fast with the iron latch, and feel a delicious thrill at the stillness. This is the part no one writes poems about. No declarations of love or glory. Just a woman, upright before the sun, washing the sleep from her face and owning a day not yet borrowed by the world. You open the shutters a crack, just enough. Outside, the meadow still slumbers beneath a pale fog. The grass is glazed with silver. One bird chirps, tentative, as if asking permission. You say nothing aloud, But in your heart, you answer, not yet. Behind you, the house holds its breath. The cat on the hearth doesn't stir. The firewood waits to be split. The sourdough waits to rise. But you don't wait. You live in this moment, full and unbothered. There is a difference. Eventually, the world will wake. It will pull at you with its usual hands, dough to knead, a neighbor's child to mind, a priest with questions he thinks are answers. But for now, you belong only to yourself. And that, more than anything, is glorious. The basin waits for you, carved smooth by years of use and the care of hands like yours, now gone. You lift the wooden jug with practiced grace, the movement quiet and certain. The water falls in a clean arc, catching a sliver of light as it splashes gently into the bowl. The sound is soft but satisfying, like the breath of the house exhaling with you. You reach for the bundle of dried petals you tied up last summer, a mix of rose, marigold, and a whisper of sage. You crumble a pinch between your fingers and let it fall into the water, watching the colors bloom like secrets unfurling. You do not need luxury to feel beautiful. You make your own. Rose petals that once climbed the fence behind your cousin's barn now float in your wash basin like a spell. You swirl them with your fingers, slow and deliberate, and dip the clean cloth, the soft one you keep tucked inside your shift for mornings like this. The scent rises, floral, earthy, something like memory. Not all of your life belongs to labor. Not all of it is made of bread dough and firewood. Some of it is this. Your face leans into the cloth, the cold of the water making you gasp, but it's a welcome sting. It wakes you, sharpens you. You press the wet fabric along your cheeks, your brow, behind your ears. You clean not just sleep from your skin, but yesterday. Dust, laughter, that irritating smudge of goat spit from when you tried to guide one stubborn creature out of the neighbor's garden. All of it drips down now, into the basin, gone. You glance at your reflection in the water. It's not a mirror, not really. The surface is too soft, and the light too low, but you catch a glimpse of yourself all the same. Your hair's a bit wild. Your left eyebrow is plotting its own rebellion. But your eyes are clear, and your mouth already hints at a smile, amused and private. You're not young in the way girls are. You're something better, seasoned, radiant with use, like a well-loved kettle or a favorite knife. You know what suits you. You know what you're worth, and you know you don't need anyone to say it aloud for it to be true. You rub your temples with the last of the scented water, massaging in slow circles the way your aunt taught you when you were 12 and tried to be grown too fast. Your fingers remember the rhythm, and your mind slips into a place without errands or expectations, just skin, breath, and the pleasure of being alone with both. In the corner, the cat stretches and yawns, unimpressed by your ceremony. You glance at her, smirk, and return your attention to your ritual. She can wait. Everyone can wait. You're not yet the version of yourself they get today. This part is for you. You wring the cloth out carefully and hang it by the hearth. The petals remain in the basin, pale now, their scent fading. You tip the bowl gently and pour the water over the doorstep, not wasteful, but deliberate. Your mother used to say that washing with herbs cleans the soul as well as the skin, but only if you give the water back to the earth when you're done. You never asked whether that was magic or just superstition. It feels like both, and that's good enough. Your hands smell faintly of roses, and you press your palms to your cheeks, once more before moving to your chest, your collarbone, the place just behind your neck. You know the scent will linger. Not bold like perfume, but something quieter, something you'll carry with you as you move through the day, subtle, secret, enough to make you feel like something rare in a world full of ordinary. You gather your hair into a knot and tie it with a ribbon that has frayed edges and a story. It's not the neatest knot, but it holds. That's what matters. The sun is up now, not fully, but enough. Light seeps through the shutters, and you catch another glimpse of yourself in the basin water before it fully settles. You look calm, capable, a little smug, maybe. You let yourself wink at the reflection. You're ready. Let the day try you. You've already claimed the best part. The hearth is quiet when you approach, but it won't stay that way for long. You kneel beside the ash bed and brush it back with the flat of your hand, revealing the faintest glow still pulsing beneath yesterday's coals. A whisper of heat touches your fingers, and you smile. You never let it die entirely. That's the trick. Not brute strength or constant feeding, but memory. The fire remembers you, and you remember it, and so it never truly goes cold. You add a curl of birch bark, then a twist of straw, and finally a few thin twigs, building the flame not with haste but with patience. It rewards you for it. With a little coaxing, the fire wakes, stretches, and rises into itself like it knows exactly who called it back. You blow on it, slow and steady, until orange licks become full flame. Then you add the bigger logs, dry and waiting, and settle the iron pot above the coals. You don't need to look. You could do this blindfolded and humming. This is your domain, and it responds to you like muscle to bone. The kitchen begins to warm, not just in temperature but in spirit. The shadows lift from the corners. The scent of smoke, clean, woodsy, familiar, fills the space like a prayer. You stand, stretch your back, and gather the things you laid out the night before. Flour in a cloth-covered bowl, a crock of sour milk, a pinch of salt wrapped in waxed parchment. You never forget the salt. That was a mistake you made once, long ago, and your sisters still bring it up when they're trying to make you blush. You roll your sleeves to your elbows, tie your apron tight, and begin the rhythm that steadies your mornings. Hands in the flour, a well in the center, milk poured in slow. You mix with your fingers first, just to feel it. Bread isn't a task, it's a conversation. You listen to how the dough forms, how it pulls away from the bowl, how it sighs when you knead it with your full weight. Your arms ache, just slightly, in the good way. You press and fold, until the dough is smooth and warm beneath your palms. Outside, the first clatter of footsteps begins above. Someone stumbling out of bed, probably the youngest, still half dreaming. But they won't bother you yet. They know better. The kitchen is yours until the bread is shaped and resting beneath the linen cloth. You move through the space like a dancer. Not the kind on stages, but the kind who knows every board of the floor, every shelf by heart. You add oats to the simmering pot for porridge, pluck a few dried apples from the string by the rafters, and crush a bit of cinnamon bark in your mortar. The scent rises like something holy, warm and spiced. A reminder that even in a world of damp boots and endless chores, pleasure can be simple and near. The first cup of cider, still cold from the cellar, is yours and yours alone. You sip it leaning against the wall, watching the pot bubble and the bread rise. A cat weaves between your legs and complains about nothing in particular. You nudge it with your foot, and it sprawls dramatically in a patch of warming stone. By the time the others appear, blinking and yawning, the kitchen hums with life. The bread has risen. The porridge is thick and golden. The fire crackles with confidence. Someone kisses your cheek and steals a spoonful from the pot, wincing when it burns their tongue. You say nothing, just raise an eyebrow. They learn, eventually. There's laughter now, low and lazy. The kind that comes when people feel safe and fed, and still not quite ready to face the fields or the loom or the chapel. You let it wash over you as you slide the bread into the oven, the crust already dreaming of color. You command the hearth in everything it touches, and somehow, without needing to announce it, everyone else knows it too. This is the room they come to first, and the room they miss when they're far. The place where things taste better and troubles shrink just a little. You don't call it power, but it is. You wait until the moment is exactly right. Not when the crust is still crackling from the oven's heat. That would give you away. But after it settles, when the scent hangs thick and golden in the air, and the kitchen is quiet once more. The loaf rests on the cutting board, round and proud, its top split just so, the marks from your blade now delicate ridges of caramel brown. It is still warm, and you can feel it when you press your fingers gently into the side. There's softness there, still springy, still alive with yeast and time. This loaf is yours. You baked it. You claimed it with your hands and heat, and now you will claim it with your hunger. You glance over your shoulder, more from habit than fear. The others are out in the yard or still dressing, or picking mud from the soles of their boots. No one is watching, and that's just as well. Some things are sweeter without witnesses. You reach for the knife. Your knife, the one with the bone handle, worn smooth from years of use, and slice through the bread. The crust gives with a whisper of resistance, and the blade sinks into the tender steam of the crumb, which parts like warm silk. The first slice always feels like a miracle. You pry it free and hold it close for a moment, just breathing in the scent of wheat and salt and fire. This is more than food. This is evidence that life, despite its irritations and responsibilities, can still produce something perfect. You don't bother with a plate. You reach instead for the round of cheese, fresh from yesterday's pressing, pale and soft, and just starting to lose its shape at the edges. You slice a wedge and lay it thick across the bread, watching it begin to melt from the heat. Not all at once, just enough to gloss the surface and curl slightly at the corners. You sit on the bench beside the hearth, your knees pulled up and your bare feet tucked under your hem. The cat eyes you from a distance, twitching its tail in a slow rhythm of disapproval. You ignore it. The cat has its own secrets, and you're not about to share yours. The first bite is everything. The crust shatters delicately between your teeth, and the center gives like a promise kept. The cheese, still cool in the middle but soft at the edges, tastes of milk and salt, and the faintest tang that reminds you it's alive, just like the bread, just like you. You close your eyes just for a moment and chew slowly. No one is asking you anything. No one needs your hands, your time, your answers. This moment, this breakfast, is yours alone. And that makes it taste better than anything you'll eat all day. You take another bite, and another, the rhythm gentle, unrushed. Outside the window, a pair of doves coo softly, and a breeze stirs the edge of the curtain. The world is starting to move again, but you are still anchored by crust and comfort. You think about calling your sister in, just to share a slice, but you don't. Not yet. She'll have her turn, and the second loaf will be ready soon enough. This one, this first one, is for the baker, not the crowd. For the hands that mixed and kneaded and tested the heat of the coals by instinct alone. No one ever thanks the oven for the cake, but you know better. You eat the last of the slice, licking cheese from your thumb, and reach for a second, a little thinner this time, less indulgent. You tell yourself it's just to test the middle. But you know what this really is. A celebration of your skill, your quiet, your ability to carve out joy in a day that will soon fill with other people's needs. When the door creaks and footsteps shuffle near, you wipe your hands on your apron and set the knife down as though it hasn't moved in hours. The loaf looks untouched, save for one missing wedge. You leave the remaining cheese in the bowl and set a clean cloth over what's left of your secret. They'll eat, they'll praise, they'll ask for seconds, and only you will know that the best part came before the first thank you. The dress is simple but not plain. You lay it across the bed first, smoothing the creases with your palm, feeling the texture of the weave beneath your fingertips. The fabric is worn in places, near the cuffs, at the seam where your waist bends, but it's softened by time, not weakened. It fits you better now than when it was new. Age has taught both of you how to give in the right places, how to hold shape where it matters, how to shift without fraying. You lift it gently and slide it over your head, letting it fall into place like muscle memory. You lace the bodice slowly, not because you're being vain, but because the act deserves attention. Your fingers tug the cords in practiced rhythm. Cross, pull, pause, tighten. You know your body well enough not to pretend it's the same each morning. Some days your chest feels fuller. Some days your hips settle differently, but today everything aligns. The laces cinch with ease, and the dress hugs you close without complaint. You glance down at the tidy crisscross of the ties and nod to yourself. You won't win any pageants. Not that such nonsense exists. But you look put together, capable, composed. You choose the dark blue apron, the one with the faded embroidery along the hem. It's not the fanciest you own, but it's your favorite. Your sister once teased you about the color, said it looked like a storm cloud, and you wore it the next 3 days just to prove you could make a storm look good. The embroidery isn't perfect. Your stitches were messier then, but the crooked little flowers still make you smile. You tie it at the waist, knotting it firmly but leaving the ends long, just because you like the way they move when you walk. At the mirror, really just a polished bit of tin nailed above the wash basin, you examine your reflection. The light is uneven, and your face warps slightly if you tilt your head, but it's enough. You touch your hair, already braided and pinned, and adjust one loose strand that never quite stays where it belongs. You don't mind it. That piece of hair has its own ideas. You respect that. You dab a touch of lavender water behind your ears and at your wrists. It isn't perfume exactly, but it smells clean and soft, like summer and soap and something you can't quite name. It's just for you. No one else will notice, or if they do, they'll assume it came from the laundry or the garden. But you'll know, and it's enough. You step back, adjusting the hem of your dress so it falls evenly over your boots. They're scuffed, of course, and a little loose now that the leather's stretched, but they're yours. You polished them last week while humming under your breath, not because anyone asked, but because it pleased you to see them shine. You run your toe along the edge of the hearth, a little test, to be sure you won't trip when you stride across the kitchen. No hesitation, just presence. A laugh echoes faintly from outside, followed by the bark of a dog and someone calling out for eggs. You don't rush. You're not late. Time moves by your choosing, and this part of the morning is yours to control. You pull your shawl around your shoulders and fasten the wooden clasp at your collarbone, the one your grandmother carved when you were just tall enough to reach the table edge. It creaks slightly when it turns, but it holds tight, just like always. You look once more at the tin mirror, tilt your head, and lift your chin. You don't dress for men. You never have. You don't dress to impress or flatter or disappear. But you do enjoy looking fantastic. And you do. It begins with a knock on the door, soft and hesitant, the kind someone gives when they're not quite sure if they're ready to hear the truth. You don't look up right away. You're stirring the stew, and it's at that perfect moment, just before the carrots give up their stubbornness and surrender to the broth, that demands your full attention. You give it 3 more turns, clockwise, then lower the spoon and wipe your hands on your apron before calling out for them to come in. It's Breda, barely 20, cheeks pink from either nerves or the wind. She clutches a bundle of embroidery she clearly isn't working on, and she stands in your doorway like someone unsure if they've wandered into a church or a trap. You gesture toward the bench near the window, the one you keep clear for just such occasions, and she sinks onto it with a sigh heavier than her frame should allow. You pour her a cup of cider and wait. You've learned not to fill the silence too soon. If people want your thoughts, they'll give you the pieces first. "I think he's going to ask me," she says after a long moment, staring into the cup like it might offer a vision. "And I don't know what I want him to say." There it is. Love. Again. It's almost always love. You sit across from her and nod like you're just now considering the possibilities, though your mind already sees the whole thing from beginning to end. You've watched her look at him since spring. You've seen the way he grows taller when she passes, the way he stumbles over words when she's nearby. But knowing things and saying them aren't the same, and what she wants isn't facts. It's a shape for her feelings, something she can hold and examine and not feel silly for owning. You talk for a while. You ask a question or two, enough to help her hear herself aloud, and you tell her a story about your own youth, carefully chosen, just enough mischief to keep it interesting, just enough wisdom to keep it useful. When she leaves, her shoulders are straighter and her brow less pinched, and she kisses your cheek without thinking. You smile as she goes and turn back to the stew, which now smells even better for having shared your time. Later it's old Hilda, with a new ache in her knees and a theory about onions in her boots. She wants you to tell her if that's foolish or genius, and also whether you still have that salve you made last winter. You send her home with the jar and strict instructions, which she'll follow for 3 days before forgetting and swearing it never worked. In the afternoon, a boy appears with a chicken under one arm and a guilty look on his face. He doesn't ask a question exactly, but mumbles something about accidents and feathers and whether chickens can fall in love. You don't press him for details. You explain that animals, like people, sometimes act strangely when confused or frightened, and that love isn't always the reason for everything. He nods solemnly and thanks you like you've just handed him a treasure map. And so it goes. Some ask about recipes, how to keep turnips from tasting like sadness, how to stretch flour 3 more days. Others bring heavier things, a friend who's changed, a father who drinks too much, a neighbor who stares too long and never speaks. You don't always have answers, but they don't always need them. Sometimes they just want to hear the sound of your voice steady in the storm. You never asked for this. You didn't stand up and declare yourself the village sage or the wise woman by the hearth. It happened slowly, the way moss grows along the side of a well, quietly, patiently, with deep roots no one sees. You stir your stew again as the sun begins to lower, and you feel the stillness that comes from being trusted. It isn't pride exactly. It's something older and gentler, like knowing your place in the pattern and feeling no need to shout about it. They come to you, not because you're perfect, but because you listen, and because you've lived, and because what you give them lasts. The market is already humming by the time you arrive, not yet loud, but layered with the pleasant sounds of waking commerce. Hooves clop past on the muddy road, dogs bark in excited greeting, and the smell of wood smoke mixes with fresh bread and something sweet frying in a pan. You step over a puddle with practiced ease and nod at the baker's son, who is elbow deep in dough and still manages to grin like he's never seen a prettier sunrise. You walk the aisle not like a queen, exactly, but like someone who knows the weight of her own presence. You're not overdressed, just the same dress you always wear on market day, the slate-colored one with the deep pockets and the thick apron that still carries a hint of last week's time. But the way you carry yourself does half the talking. You move without rush, shoulders back, chin lifted, as though everything worth seeing is already in front of you. And, often, it is. The first call comes from your left, where old Marta is laying out bunches of early greens on her linen cloth. You'd best take these before the widow. Pell snatches them, she says, holding up a bundle of chard, still glistening with dew. You glance over and raise an eyebrow. Did you grow them sweet or bitter this time? You ask, half smiling. They grew the way I told them to, she replies, grinning wide. You don't reach for your coin. You just slide the greens into your basket, and Marta waves off your hand with a flutter of her apron. You'll bring me that honeycomb, won't you? The good one with the pale gold centers? You nod, and she nods, and that's the deal made. No tally, no quibbling. Next, it's the apple cart. Tom's youngest has climbed into the back and is singing nonsense to herself while lining up the apples by shade. You pluck 2 from the top row, 1 blushed red, 1 green with freckles, and turn them gently in your palm. Those are the best of the bushel, Tom says, appearing from behind the cart like a conjured ghost. I told her not to stack them too high. She never listens, you say, taking a bite of the red one. It cracks delightfully, juice running down your wrist. You offer no payment, and none is requested. He knows you'll leave him a wedge of cheese by the gate tomorrow morning. He also knows you picked his apples last year when his back gave out and his pride was too big to ask. You pass by the fishmongers and the tanners without slowing. Their goods aren't on your list today. And besides, you're not in the mood to smell like brine or hide. The potter calls out something about a new pitcher he swears won't leak this time, and you wave a hand at him, laughing. He'll bring it to your doorstep by supper, and if it leaks, he knows you'll grow herbs in it instead. At the herb stall, you linger. Tansy, fennel, marjoram, bundled with care and still pungent with summer. You choose a little of each and tuck them carefully in your basket, pausing only to sniff a bundle of mint before deciding it smells more like goat than garden today. Rilla, the vendor, eyes your selections and slips a small packet of dried violets into your hand with a wink. Just because they match your smile, she says. You pretend to scoff, but your fingers close gently around the packet. You'll save them for tea, or maybe crush them into sugar and bake something unnecessary. You circle once more for good measure, accepting a handful of cherries from a boy trying to earn a smile, and exchanging 3 jokes and a half lie with the cobbler's sister, who always manages to know everyone's secrets before they know them themselves. The breeze picks up and flutters your apron tie as you pause by the fountain to adjust your basket and stretch your neck. The sun breaks briefly through the clouds, and someone behind you whistles, not quite subtly. You don't turn around. You just walk on, slow and steady, basket full and coin purse untouched. This is your market. You don't need to own it. You already do. You don't go looking for stories. They come to you, carried on the breeze between laundry lines, tucked into shared loaves of bread, whispered just loud enough behind hands that pretend to shield but always leave a gap. You're not the loudest mouth in the village, and you don't have to be. You've learned the secret language of glances and silences, of how long someone holds a pause before answering, and what that says about their guilt or affection, or both. People tell you things without meaning to, sometimes without even realizing they've done it. You walk down the lane and nod at the cooper's wife, who's hanging her husband's shirts with a bit too much aggression. She doesn't say anything, but her jaw is tight, and you remember that he spent a little too long talking to the girl from the cider farm last festival. Nothing happened. You're sure of it, but it's not what happened that matters. It's what people feel in the not knowing. At the well, Marin draws her bucket with shaking arms, and you offer to carry it for her, not because you pity her, but because she's been thinner lately, and her eyes have that far-off shine. She lets you, and after a moment, says her husband's been talking in his sleep again, names she doesn't recognize, words she doesn't understand. You say nothing, but offer a recipe for chamomile tea with a bit of valerian root to help them both sleep deeper. She doesn't argue. When you leave, she squeezes your hand just a little too long. There's more she wants to say, but not today. By noon, you've heard 6 stories without anyone thinking they've told you a thing. You could tell them all how the butcher's apprentice is sweet on the baker's son, even though he pretends to trip every time they pass. Or how the priest's sister has been sneaking off with books from the traveling merchant's cart, hiding them in her hem, and reading them by candlelight in the hayloft. You know that old Tom keeps a pouch of peppermint leaves in his pocket, not for his breath, but because his mother used to chew them before she died, and the smell makes him feel brave. You know who really broke the handle on the millstone and who's been pretending they didn't, and who's been slipping eggs into the widow Pell's basket because they remember what it felt like to be hungry. You could spill every secret and still have more left, but you don't. You tell just enough to keep things spinning, the kind of tales that soften people rather than harden them, that bring laughter rather than shame. When young Clara asked you if it was true that Elric the Thatcher once tried to kiss a goose, you didn't deny it. You embellished. You added details about feathers and bruised pride and a bucket of pond water to the face. Clara giggled so hard she snorted, and when Elric heard the story from her 2 days later, he rolled his eyes and played along. Because the version you shared didn't mock him, it made him the kind of fool people adore. You curate, not because you crave control, but because stories are threads, and someone has to make sure they don't tangle into a knot. You know which ones to tie into memory and which to leave to unravel. You remember the things that matter, the griefs people bury under politeness, the joy they try to hide when they're afraid it'll be taken. And you remember not to say them aloud. When people pass you in the lane, they smile. They greet you by name. They think of you as kind, or wise, or merely someone who always seems to know when to pass the salt or the right word. They don't realize how much you're holding in your hands, wrapped up like bundles of herbs, carefully labeled and stored. They trust you. You've never asked them to, but it's there, like a gift tucked beneath your apron folds, given again each time someone leans a little closer and lowers their voice. You listen, you nod, you hold their stories like secrets planted in soil, watered, never overexposed, blooming quietly when the season is right. The sisters live in the stone house just past the mill lane, the one with the climbing roses that bloom brighter and longer than anyone else's, no matter what the weather's been. The roof slants like a hat cocked at a jaunty angle, and there's always some faint trace of music leaking through the windows. A reed pipe, a humming alto, once even a hurdy-gurdy when their cousin from the coast came to visit. They don't keep a man in the house, never have, and they don't keep hens either. They say they don't care for the clucking. You're not sure how it started. The visits. One morning, maybe 3 summers ago, you'd brought them a jar of plum preserves after hearing they'd lost a basket of fruit to a thieving deer, and they'd ushered you inside before you had the chance to protest. There'd been cake, and that tea, sharp with ginger, and something sweet and secret that might have been fennel blossom. Since then, it's become a kind of ritual, though never on a schedule. They call for you when they want company, and you never quite know how they decide when that is. This morning, you find the note tucked into your basket at market, written in crisp ink on a card that smells faintly of cloves. Tea? It says, and nothing more, but the loop of the question mark is unmistakably Joelle's. So you finish your errands quickly and follow the winding path to the sisters' home, brushing dust from your hem and smoothing your hair before knocking on the carved green door. It opens immediately, as if they'd been waiting just behind it, and Joelle greets you with that sly little smile she always wears when she knows something she won't tell. "You're early," she says, which is a lie, but not one worth correcting. Odette is already in the parlor, reclined like a queen among a throne of embroidered pillows, wearing a robe that may once have been part of a noblewoman's wardrobe or a theatrical costume. It's difficult to tell, and neither sister ever explains. She lifts her teacup in salute and gestures to the seat beside her, where steam rises from a waiting cup nestled in its saucer like a pearl. You sit, tucking your skirt beneath your knees, and accept the tea. It is, as always, perfectly warm, perfectly strong, and flavored with a dozen herbs you can name and 3 you can't. The sisters don't sell their blends. They don't share them either. The tea is invitation only. The conversation begins with weather, because it must, but it veers quickly into stranger territory, local politics, ancient poetry, and the way the baker's apprentice had flour on his nose in a most suspicious pattern yesterday morning. Joelle pulls out a book so new the pages crackle when opened, a translated volume from somewhere east, full of proverbs and riddles and poems so strange they require a kind of deciphering. She reads one aloud, pausing only to sip. You and Odette argue over its meaning for a full 10 minutes, only to discover the next page contains an apology from the translator for not understanding it either. You laugh, real and unguarded, head tipped back and shoulders shaking. The sisters join you, their laughter not delicate but rich, like wine. There's something about this house that loosens the world's grip on your spine. You sit straighter and feel lighter at once, as if the air here carries less duty, more permission. They serve cakes, shaped like tiny moons and slivers of pear, soaked in honeyed wine, and they tease you gently when you take a second helping. "We only bake extra when we expect greed," Odette says, winking. And you laugh again because what else can you do? Eventually you rise. Time has passed unnoticed, and the sun has slipped lower in the sky. They don't walk you out. They never do. But they both kiss your cheeks as you go, leaving faint traces of rosewater and something darker you can't quite place. You step back into the world with your hands empty but your chest full, your head still buzzing from riddles and laughter and a tea that tastes faintly of mischief. And somehow, as always, you leave smiling. You didn't set out to cause a stir, not really. The morning had begun like any other, with tea and toast and the usual dance of early chores. And by the time you arrived at the spinning circle behind the chapel, your apron smelled faintly of rosemary, and your hands were already dusted in wool fluff. You greeted the others politely, took your usual stool, and set your spindle twirling with practiced ease. The women around you nodded, murmured greetings, and settled into the rhythm of the wheel and the talk, which was proper and predictable at first. They were already at it by the time you arrived. Sister Eledra describing the miraculous yield from the convent's garden, and Marta, her face always pinched like she's biting a lemon, lamenting that her youngest had taken to humming tavern songs in the morning. Someone tutted and crossed herself. Someone else mentioned how sinful the lyrics were these days. You kept spinning, nodding at the right moments, the corners of your mouth twitching. Then Sister Eledra, the youngest of the pious women, asked what you thought the lyrics meant. The ones about the stable boy and the dairymaid with the creamy churn and the rattling yolk. You should have known better. You really should have. You paused just long enough to catch everyone's attention, then leaned in slightly and said, "Well, it depends on what sort of yolk you imagine, doesn't it?" The silence was instant and glorious. Then, as if someone had dropped a spoon into a pot, it clattered into nervous laughter, wide-eyed gasps, and one shocked, "Oh," from the oldest of them all, Lady Genevieve, who hadn't reacted to anything since her husband died 5 winters ago. Marta sputtered. Eledra turned crimson. "And you?" You just smiled, as innocent as a newborn lamb who happened to know exactly where the fence was weak. You're not wicked. You don't say cruel things. You don't spread rumor or rot. But you do know how to find the edge of a conversation and run your finger along it like a knife-sharp spine. The women know it too. They gather around it, pretend to tusk and frown, but they never stop listening. They never move away. Someone tried to change the subject. Something about a recipe for turnip stew. But you steered it gently back, recalling a story of your cousin's wedding where the priest accidentally blessed the bride's bosom instead of the union, and she had to spend the next hour pretending she wasn't glowing with divine embarrassment. The group fell apart in laughter. Even Marta cracked a smile before remembering who she was and clamping it down. It's not that they're humorless, these women of linen collars and quiet sighs. It's just that they forget they're allowed to laugh. They forget their mouths were made for more than hymns and hushes. But you remember. You remind them. You use wit like a needle, pricking the seams of propriety just enough to let the air in. By the time the baskets were half full of carded wool and the sun had shifted behind the chapel wall, the women were leaning toward you instead of away. You asked if Sister Eledra had any more questions about lyrics. She turned pink and muttered something about sinful metaphors, but she was smiling behind her teacup, and you knew it. Before you left, Lady Genevieve caught your wrist with a hand so light it barely touched. "You remind me of my younger sister," she said, "before she married that man who tried to outlaw laughter. You didn't know she had a sister. No one talks about her." But you nodded and squeezed the old woman's hand, and she nodded back like something had been unburied. You walked away with your basket on your hip and a half-dozen pairs of eyes watching your back. None of them would admit they enjoyed it, not out loud. But next week, they'll shift their stools closer. They'll bring better tea, They'll pretend they don't wait for the moment you open your mouth and say something that sends ripples through their restraint. And when you do, they'll blush. But they'll laugh too, every single time. The path is barely a path anymore, more suggestion than trail, a ribbon of flattened grass that winds behind the orchard and past the blackberry hedge that's grown thicker than it should. You duck under a bent branch and sidestep a patch of nettles, feet sure and quiet. No one follows you. No one ever does. This is the way to the place no one mentions, not because it's forbidden, but because it's precious. Some things lose their magic when spoken aloud too often. You reach the gap in the old stone wall and slip through sideways, careful not to snag your apron on the mossy edges. The light changes as you pass through, softens. It always does. The air here smells faintly of thyme and warm soil, and the breeze is thick with bee song. This is your field, though it belongs to no one really. A great stretch of wildflowers and grasses that sway like a living sea. Goldenrod, yarrow, cornflower, queen's lace, and others you never bothered to name, all nodding together under the wide open sky. You exhale without meaning to, like your ribs have been waiting all day to expand. You take off your shoes, sink your toes into the soft earth, and walk into the flowers until the world behind you disappears. There's a flat patch you cleared last summer, hidden behind a tangle of tall foxglove. You lay down your shawl and lower yourself onto it, stretching out on your back, arms folded beneath your head. The sun is warm on your face, the kind of warmth that seeps into your skin slowly, a blessing rather than a burn. You feel the weight of your body pressing into the ground, and the weight of the day, what little of it you've had so far, lifting. You let your eyes drift shut. The flowers tickle at your elbows. A bee buzzes past your ear and doesn't stay long. Somewhere far off, a bird calls 3 times, as if reminding you that you're still part of the world. Even here, you don't answer. The field doesn't need your voice. It only asks for your presence. You think, briefly, of the chores waiting back at the house, the firewood still to be stacked, the turnips that want scrubbing, the jar of gooseberries that's begun to fizz ominously in the pantry. But none of that belongs here. Here, you are not a woman of duties and tasks and quick answers. Here, you are only skin and breath and stillness. You are not needed, and that is a relief. You pluck a daisy from the edge of your blanket and hold it above your face, squinting at the white petals against the blazing blue. You could pull them off one by one and ask the old question, loves me not. But it seems unnecessary. The field already loves you. It lets you return without judgment, even when weeks pass between visits. It doesn't mind if you're quiet or tired or a little mean. It welcomes your full self, not just the pleasant parts. You twirl the daisy once and tuck it behind your ear, then let your hand fall back to your side. The grass hums against your fingertips. A ladybug ambles across your wrist and lifts its wings, then decides you're not worth the effort and stays. Time stretches here. It doesn't slip away like it does at home, where you look up and the sun has vanished behind a mountain of linen or boiled down into soup. In this place, minutes are soft things. They bloom and curl, they don't race. You are allowed to be slow. Eventually, you will rise. You'll dust off your skirt, shake the grass from your hair, and return to the life that waits for you with hungry hands. But not yet. Not until the light changes again, and your shoulders begin to cool. Not until you've memorized the sound of bees and wind, and your own heartbeat steady in your ears. For now, you are wild and still and entirely your own, and no one knows where you are. Which is exactly the point. She shows up at your door with fabric tucked under her arm, and panic barely hidden behind her eyes. It's a dull blue linen, not new, not old, the kind that was probably meant for tablecloths or curtains, but somehow ended up in her hands. She doesn't speak right away, just stands there, clutching the bundle like it might run off if she loosens her grip. She's 16, maybe 17, that age where everything feels enormous and urgent and a little dangerous. You recognize the look in her eyes. You remember wearing it yourself. You gesture her inside without fuss and clear the end of the table where your mending basket usually lives. She sets the fabric down as if it's something sacred, and maybe, to her, it is. You've seen her around, always in borrowed dresses that fit like borrowed lives. Too tight at the shoulders, or too short at the hem, never quite her own. This fabric, though, is hers, and today she wants to make something of it. You begin by cutting it open and laying it flat. Her fingers hover near yours, twitching to help but afraid to interfere. You hand her the chalk and tell her to draw the lines, not because you need her to, but because she needs to see that she can. Her first strokes are hesitant, crooked. You say nothing, just hand her the ruler and show her how to hold it steady with her left hand while her right follows along. The next line is straighter. She doesn't smile, but her shoulders shift just slightly, like something inside her has settled. When it's time to stitch, her hands shake. The needle trembles in her grip, like it knows it's being tested. You take it from her gently and thread it in one quick motion, knotting the end with a twist she doesn't quite catch. You offer it back to her, and she starts the seam. The stitches are too long, uneven, wandering toward the edge of the fabric like a drunk trying to follow a path. You lean over, your hands guiding hers, not taking over, just reminding. Smaller, you say, closer together, like you're whispering secrets the thread needs to keep. She tries again. The stitches improve. Not perfect, but deliberate now, purposeful. Her breath slows. You sit beside her, mending a sock that no one but you would bother saving, and let the silence settle around you like wool. After a while, she speaks, softly, tells you the dress is for the spring festival, that she hasn't gone in 2 years because she never had anything decent to wear. She doesn't say she wants to be seen, but it's there between the words. You don't laugh or tease. You just nod, and the two of you keep sewing. By the time the bodice takes shape, her hands no longer shake. She smooths the fabric with confidence now, tucks the seams without prompting. You show her how to pleat the skirt, how to pinch just enough fabric so that it flows without clinging. You let her choose the buttons from your jar, the mismatched collection that lives in the kitchen drawer, some carved from bone, others plain brass or mother of pearl. She picks 3 small wooden ones, identical in shape and just barely sanded smooth. When she lines them up on the table, she touches each one like it's a charm against failure. As the afternoon sun turns golden, she sews the last hem and holds up the dress. It isn't perfect. The neckline wobbles, and the sleeves are just a little off. But it's hers. Every stitch, every pulled thread, every patch where you gently undid and helped her start again, it all belongs to her. She folds it with reverence, cradling it against her chest. Before she leaves, she pauses at the door, her fingers tracing the edge of the frame. She looks back at you, opens her mouth like she wants to say something, then just smiles instead. It's a shy smile, but behind it is something stronger, something sharper than fabric and thread. She came for a dress. She leaves with something far more valuable. She waits for you outside the bakery every 3rd morning, always pretending she's just there to help her father haul iron racks or drop off horseshoes for the baker's oven. But you've seen her lean against the post, chewing a bit of licorice root and pretending not to notice the minute you step into the street. She always spots you, always straightens her spine and smooths her tunic, and watches you with the kind of quiet hunger reserved for saints, performers, and stories made flesh. She's maybe 12. That age where a girl feels too big for braids but too small for the life ahead of her. Her boots are scuffed and her hands smell like ash, but her eyes sparkle like she's just glimpsed the future and it's wearing your shawl. You didn't plan on being admired. You don't walk with intention the way nobility does. But there's a rhythm in your stride, sure and certain, shaped by years of crossing wet fields and dusty markets, with your basket swinging and your chin high. You walk like someone who knows exactly where she's going, even when she's only going to fetch more onions. She sees it, she studies it, and slowly, over the weeks, she started mimicking it. You catch her in the reflection of a window, pacing in the dusty alley beside her father's forge, chin lifted just so, elbows tucked in, trying to make her steps longer. You don't say anything. You just watch, amused and flattered in equal measure, and then keep walking as if you haven't noticed the small echo of yourself blooming 2 paces behind. One afternoon, she follows you all the way to the edge of the square. You stop at the fountain and sit on the low stone wall, resting your ankles while the sun catches the curve of your shoe. She approaches slowly, as if crossing into sacred space, and stands beside you with her arms awkwardly crossed. "Your shoes," she says, not meeting your eyes. "They're nice." You glance down. They're not fancy, just soft leather, worn to the shape of your feet and patched twice on the soles, but they fit you, and you walk well in them, and that's what matters. "Want to try them?" you ask. She blinks. You see the hesitation flash across her face, the kind that comes from years of being told not to ask, not to touch, not to want. You reach down and slip them off before she can think twice. "Go on," you say. "Let's see if they like you." She lowers herself onto the stone, pulls off her boots, and slides into your shoes. They're too big, of course. Her heels slip out with every step, but she walks a slow, wobbly circle around the fountain like she's wearing jeweled slippers. Then she stops, stands tall, and walks again. This time with your gait, your rhythm, her back straight, and her head tilted just a little toward the sky. She grins, wide, toothy, unapologetic. You watch her and feel something swell inside your chest. Not pride, exactly, but a kind of startled tenderness. You are not her mother, or her sister, or even her friend, but she has chosen you as something more mysterious. A compass. A story she wants to grow into. You let her walk a little longer, then you call her back and trade the shoes for her boots. Before she leaves, she runs a finger along the edge of your shawl and asks if blue always makes people look taller. You shrug and say it doesn't hurt. She darts off, boots flapping, but glances back once before turning the corner. That look sticks with you. It's the look of a girl who just realized that becoming herself might mean borrowing someone else's confidence until hers kicks in. You didn't mean to be anyone's goddess, but you wear it well. It starts, as most dangerous laughter does, with something small. A raised eyebrow, a muttered insult about a rooster's romantic inclinations, a bit of spiced meat dropped on the floor and retrieved with entirely too much ceremony. You're seated on a low bench near the fire, your boots kicked out in front of you, and a tankard of ale resting comfortably in your hand, half full and warm. The room smells of barley and garlic and wool and human heat, and the hum of conversation folds itself around you like a thick blanket. Someone strums a lyre in the corner, tunelessly but with conviction. It's a good night, a harmless one. Or so you think. Branwen is the first to really go for it, grinning like a fox with feathers in her teeth. She leans forward with a smirk and says something about Brother Alric's eyebrows, specifically, that they resemble twin ferrets, trying to flee in opposite directions. You choke a little on your drink, snorting into the rim of your cup, but manage to hold it together, barely. Someone across the room hears the word ferret and shouts, "What about the goat that chased the bishop?" And then it's over. The room bursts like a lanced boil. People double over, slap the table, lean into each other with red faces and streaming eyes. You try to sip your ale to steady yourself, to let the foam soothe your rising hysteria. But Bronwyn is watching you with that look, the one that promises she's just getting started. "I swear on my aunt's second chin," she says. "He didn't even flinch when the goose bit him, just kept preaching with the bird latched to his backside like he thought it was. The Holy Spirit come early. You don't stand a chance." The laugh punches its way out of you, uncontrollable, shaking your shoulders and stealing the last of your breath. You try to swallow, but the ale goes down the wrong way, up instead of down, and suddenly your nose is a geyser of bitter foam and shame. You double over, coughing and spluttering, eyes watering as laughter and ale fight for space in your skull. The people around you go silent for a moment. Just a beat, then roar with approval. You wave your hands in front of your face, trying to both clear your vision and save some dignity, but it's already gone. Branwen is howling, clutching her ribs, and someone thumps you on the back hard enough to make your ears ring. You don't care. You're laughing too, wheezing, clutching your sides while your stomach cramps with joy so pure and unruly it should be illegal in some places. It is not ladylike. It is not graceful. It is better. It's real, wild joy, the kind that seizes you before you can pose for it, that yanks you out of your seat and reminds you what it means to be alive and absolutely unconcerned with appearances. Your face is blotchy, your nose runs, there may be crumbs in your lap, and you feel magnificent. When you finally catch your breath, you sag against Branwen's shoulder, tears still leaking from the corners of your eyes. She hands you a linen cloth with a flourish and says, "Here, divine vessel, mop thy holy spout." You nearly lose it again. The fire crackles, the lyre player gives up and starts whistling instead. Someone offers to fetch you another ale, and you shake your head, still wiping foam from your face. Your stomach aches, your cheeks burn, and your ribs feel like they've been thumped with a ladle. But something inside you feels loose and light, like a knot undone. You didn't plan to laugh like that tonight. You certainly didn't mean to make a spectacle of yourself. But you did. And it was good. Later, when you're back home and the stars are blinking through the shutters, you'll remember the moment your nose betrayed you and grin into your pillow. Because joy, the real kind, the messy kind, doesn't care about manners. And neither, in that moment, did you. He arrives with the same swagger every time, boots dusty from the road and a feather tucked in his cap like he invented music and modesty in the same breath. His lute is slung over his shoulder, worn and polished in all the places that matter, and his smile, oh, his smile, is practiced to perfection, the kind that's melted more than a few resolve-thin hearts between the tavern and the village green. You see him coming from across the square and suppress a grin, already bracing for whatever honeyed nonsense he's about to peddle today. He spots you and raises 2 fingers in a mock salute, eyes bright. "Ah, the wise woman of the Western Hill," he says, approaching like a courtier with nowhere better to be. "Tell me, do you brew potions for love or only for disappointment?" "Only the second," you reply, not missing a beat. "They keep longer." He laughs, delighted, as if you've confirmed something he suspected all along. You gesture to the bench beside your stall and he lowers himself into it, with a flourish more suited to a throne. You don't offer him bread or cider. That would be too easy. Instead, you continue shelling peas, letting the rhythm of your work dictate the pace. He watches you a little too closely, waiting, hoping for an invitation that won't come. "You know," he begins, leaning his elbow on the table, "I once wrote a song about a woman with eyes like storm clouds and a wit sharp enough to peel an apple from across the room. I hope you gave her a name more original than my love," you say. "Or did you rhyme it with dove, glove, and above, like a good little bard?" He clutches his chest like you've wounded him and exhales dramatically. "You wound me." "No," you say, dropping another pea into the bowl. "I restrain myself." That earns a low whistle and a tilt of the head. He's handsome, there's no denying it, with his sun-browned skin and lips always curved like he's halfway through a song or a secret. But it's the kind of handsome that begs to be challenged, not indulged. You don't mind watching him flirt with the baker's daughter or coax a coin from a lonely widow with a verse. But when he turns that gaze toward you, you make sure it hits a wall of humor first. Still, there's pleasure in the game. You ask him what tune he's writing now, and he launches into a half-sung verse about a nightingale and a midnight tryst, his voice low and rich, shaped like the memory of candlelight. You listen, amused, arms folded. He gets halfway through the second stanza before you interrupt. You rhyme desire with fire. You point out, dry as parchment. That's not poetry. That's a sermon with better lighting. He grins, undeterred, and sets the lute in his lap, plucking a few lazy chords that drift into the afternoon air like smoke. People pass by and glance your way, amused or curious, wondering if this is a performance or a conversation or something in between. You know better. It's a dance, and you're leading. You lean back and rest your foot on the edge of the bench, letting your skirt pull tight around your ankle. His eyes flick there, just for a second, and return to your face with that same self-aware smile. You don't scold him. That would suggest you didn't mean for him to look. Careful, you say instead. You'll catch your tongue on that smirk. Maybe, he says, but if I lose it, I'd only need to listen. And I imagine you're far more interesting when I'm not talking over you. That, you admit, is well played. He stays a while longer, long enough to help you gather your baskets and carry them halfway home. He doesn't push, doesn't ask to linger, just walks beside you, humming some tune you recognize but can't quite place. At your gate, he tips his hat and says nothing, leaving you with the sun on your cheek and your hands pleasantly full. He thinks he's charming. He's not wrong. But he plays for a crowd, and you play for yourself. The door is latched, the shutters pulled tight, and the kettle is singing on the hook above the fire. You've hauled the water yourself, 2 buckets at a time, up from the well with aching arms and a quiet sense of triumph. There's no one here to clap for you, no ceremony to mark the occasion, but you know how rare this is. A bath with no interruptions, no half-dressed cousins barging in, no children crying over scraped knees or spilled ink, no one asking where their other shoe has gone. Just you, the flicker of the hearth, and the rising steam curling in golden wisps above the tub. The wooden basin groans as you pour in the final kettleful of hot water, its edges dark from years of use, but it holds steady. You test the temperature with your wrist and smile. It's perfect, just on the edge of too warm, the kind of heat that makes your muscles loosen before you've even stepped in. You reach for the linen pouch, hanging by the mantel, and untie it carefully, releasing a handful of crushed lavender buds into your palm. They smell like summer caught in cotton, like the skirts of temple dancers, or the breath of a well-kept garden just before dusk. You scatter them across the water, and they float like tiny boats with purple sails. You slip off your dress, tug off your stockings, and fold your shift over the stool, each layer peeled back with reverence. Your skin is flushed from the fire's warmth, your hair already curling at the temples. You step into the tub slowly, letting the heat rise up your legs, your spine, until you sink down with a soft sigh and close your eyes. For a long time, you do nothing. You don't scrub or rinse or plan the next task. You just breathe. The warmth holds you like hands too gentle to be real. Your knees peek above the water. Your toes drift. Your arms rest along the rim of the tub. The lavender opens fully in the heat, sweet and earthy, lulling your thoughts into stillness. Then, indulgently, you reach for the small dish beside the hearth and sprinkle in the last of the rose petals you saved from midsummer. You dried them carefully in your window, watching their color deepen and curl with time, knowing this moment would come eventually, a night just for you. They unfurl in the water like old memories, soft and flushed and far too lovely to be practical. You scoop the water in your hands and pour it over your shoulders, down your arms, over your thighs. Each motion is unhurried, a kind of devotion not to any god but to yourself. You massage your neck, your scalp, your feet, not for vanity or anyone's gaze, but because your body has carried you all week through fields and kitchens and expectations. You owe it this. The fire crackles softly beside you, casting orange patterns on the stone wall. A single candle burns on the windowsill, low and steady, Your hair drips in lazy trails down your spine. Somewhere far off, an owl calls once, then goes silent again. You are not lonely. You are not needed. Not in this moment. You are whole and warm and scented like a garden after rain. You are something holy. When the water cools and the petals begin to sag, you rise and step onto the dry towel you laid down in anticipation. You wrap yourself in a clean shift, linen soft from many washings, and it clings to your damp skin like second breath. You wring your hair and let it fall loose over your shoulders, then pour the bath water out the back door in slow streams, letting the petals scatter into the night. The air is cooler now, but your body holds the warmth. Your limbs are heavy and happy. You crawl into your bed, skin fragrant, breath even, and let the candle burn itself out beside you. You feel divine, and you haven't even brushed your hair. It starts with bread, the good kind, the kind you only make when company's coming, and the hearth's been hot since before sunrise. You knead it with cinnamon and honey and a touch of clove, then let it rise under linen while you stack wood by the fire and polish the spoons. You weren't planning to host anything more than a few neighbors for cider and a plate of nuts, but word travels the way fire does, fast, greedy, impossible to stop once it finds something dry to catch. By afternoon, 3 extra loaves are in the oven, and you're slicing apples with the kind of speed that makes the cat leave the room. By twilight, they begin to arrive, first in 2s and 3s, then in waves, brushing hay from their cloaks and stomping the frost off their boots. They carry things because they know better than to come empty-handed. A jug of blackberry wine, a wheel of cheese with its own legend, a bowl of sugared almonds that crack like tiny fireworks between the teeth. One woman, with cheeks pink from the cold, brings a bundle of fresh mint tied with red thread, and you place it beside the hearth just because it looks like it belongs there. The lute player is late, of course, but he always is. He knows how to make an entrance and would rather die than be early. When he does arrive, grinning, slightly breathless, smelling of smoke and pine, he tunes the instrument against the low hum of voices and begins to play without needing to be asked. The first few notes are soft and slow, the kind that pull heads around and quiet a room without force. Then he shifts into something livelier, and the crowd leans in. Your table is full before the first song ends. Pastries stuffed with pear and cheese vanish in minutes, and you refill the cider cups with a rhythm you've mastered over years of watching people try to drink and talk at the same time. You tell a joke, then another, and they laugh the way people laugh when they don't need to watch their words. It isn't a feast, not in the noble sense, but it is rich, it is warm, and it is yours. Someone produces a deck of riddles carved into little wooden tiles, passed down from an aunt who probably made up half of them and stole the rest. You take turns pulling one and reading it aloud, and the room dissolves into cheers and groans as guesses fly faster than the questions can be finished. One riddle involves a miller, a widow, and a pair of boots that no one can explain politely. When you finally give the answer, his appetite, Branwen laughs so hard she knocks over the butter dish, and no one minds. The lute player pauses to drink, then plays a love song so shameless it makes the weaver's apprentice blush and spill cider on his sleeve. Someone tries to sing along and gets the words wrong, but the tune is right, and that's all that matters. A few people dance in the small space between the table and the wall, arms raised, skirts twirling, feet slipping on the packed dirt floor. You don't join them, but you clap in time, your hands warm from cider and mischief. Later, after the fire has settled into red coals and the air smells of cloves and laughter, someone leans close and says, "This is the best night we've had in ages. What did you do to make it so perfect?" You smile and shake your head. You didn't do much. Not really. You opened the door. You made the bread. You made sure the stories were good, the fire hotter than the wind outside, and that everyone had a reason to stay longer than they meant to. No one wants to leave. Not really. Even when they do. Wrapping cloaks and stealing one last fig from the bowl. They linger by the door, promising to return, already retelling the night aloud, as if it's become legend the moment it ends. And perhaps it has. Some nights grow brighter in memory than they ever were in firelight. But this one burned just right. It happens late, after the cups are mostly empty, and the last crumbs have vanished from the platters. The fire is down to glowing embers, the kind that pulse like a heart and throw more shadow than light. People have stopped trying to out-talk the lute player and now lean against the table or sit cross-legged on the floor, arms draped over knees, eyes soft with drink and comfort. The hum of the room has fallen into a hush. Not silence, not yet, but something approaching it. And that's when they ask for a story. You try to wave it off at first, laughing, saying you've already given them enough riddles and tall tales to last until next week, but they insist. A real one, someone says, grinning. A true one, or close enough. You roll your eyes, but the corner of your mouth twitches. You feel it then, that shift in the room, the way the quiet pulls toward you, waiting. So you sit straighter. You sip the last of your cider and set the cup aside, warming your hands on your knees. And then you begin. It's not a long story, not really. Not the kind that starts with a prince or ends with a wedding. It begins in the woods, with a girl who wasn't beautiful and didn't want to be, who wore boots meant for her brother and a cloak patched so many times it looked like a tapestry. You speak slowly at first, painting the scene with simple strokes. The trees tall and wet with moss, the path narrow and winding, the rain that never quite stopped falling. You describe how the girl found a hollow tree and how something inside it whispered her name, though no one had ever said her name with kindness before. By now, no one's moving. A boot scuffs lightly against the floor, but no one coughs, no one pours another drink. Even the lute player sits back, cradling his instrument like a sleeping child. You keep going, your voice steady, threading the tale from one moment to the next like a ribbon pulled tight between your fingers. The girl in the story doesn't fight dragons. She doesn't find gold. But she listens to the whispers and answers them, and slowly, the forest stops being wild and starts being hers. She learns to ask for what she needs. She learns that magic isn't always a spark or a spell. Sometimes it's a knowing, a decision made in the dark with no one to applaud. You watch their faces as you speak. Some nod without realizing it. Some hold their breath during the quietest parts. When you get to the end, when the girl plants her feet in the clearing and tells the wind she's staying, no matter what comes next, you let your voice fall to a whisper. You let the last words hang in the air like smoke, curling and fading into silence. And no one speaks. Not for a moment. Not until the fire pops and the lute player exhales, low and slow, and says, "I've heard 100 stories in this room. That's the one I'll remember." You smile, small and quiet, and reach for your cup again, even though there's nothing left in it. The moment passes, but not all the way. It lingers in the curve of people's shoulders, in the softness around their eyes. They sit closer now. They speak in lower tones. They know they've been given something. You didn't read it from a book. You didn't memorize it. It came from the part of you that knows what it is to be alone, to be found, to choose your own ending. You spoke, and the night listened. The lute picks up its pace, and someone claps twice, fast and sharp, and suddenly the room shifts. It's not a command or an invitation, just a current that pulls you in. The bench you've been sitting on creaks as you rise, your feet already tingling from the warmth of the fire and the soft press of wool against wood. You toss your shawl over the back of a chair, unpin your hair with one practiced motion, and step forward. You slip off your shoes, leaving them neatly beside the hearth. The floor is warm beneath your stockings, soft from years of foot traffic, and polished with a dozen spills and 100 scrubbings. There's no stage, no formal square cleared for dancing, just a space wide enough for your feet, and a rhythm wide enough for your heart. Someone whistles as you take your place, not mocking, just appreciative. You grin. The music isn't complicated. It rises like bread, slow at first, then faster, building into something too joyful to sit still through. You sway once, twice, and then spin, your skirt flaring around your knees. The hem lifts just enough to show the tops of your stockings and the strong line of your calves, but you don't care. This dance isn't for them. Not entirely. You don't need a partner. You don't need permission. You dance the way you walk. Decisive, steady, sure. Your hips turn before your shoulders. Your arms lift in an arc, before falling again, loose and free. Your hair tumbles from its knot, not all at once but strand by strand, catching in the candlelight like threads of gold. You could stop to tuck it back. You don't. You spin again, and someone hands you a cup, just to test you. You take it without hesitation, lift it high in one hand, while your feet find the beat. The cider sloshes, but does not spill. A cheer rises from the corner, and you raise your eyebrows in mock offense before taking a sip mid-twirl and handing it back with a wink. Your laughter is not polite. It's a low sound, rich and warm, rising up from your chest like smoke from damp wood. The music shifts again, something quicker now, and your steps follow without thinking. You've danced this song before. In kitchens, in fields, in rainstorms. It lives in your bones. Then you feel it. A pair of eyes, steady and unmoving, watching. You know who it is before you look. The baker's cousin, perhaps, or the cooper's apprentice who's suddenly been taking the long way home past your window. It doesn't matter. You know the weight of a gaze when it holds too long. You let the dance carry you closer to the edge of the firelight, and then you meet their eyes. You do not smile. You do not nod. You keep dancing. You let them watch. Because this moment isn't a performance. It's a claim. It's joy, with teeth. It's the soft, slow grin you offer after a clever joke, the one that says you know exactly what you're doing and you're going to do it anyway. You don't look away, neither do they. You hold that gaze for one heartbeat more, then spin out of reach, carried by the music and the fire and the full-throated delight of your own movement. When the song ends, you stop with a final stomp of your heel, breathless, but not breathless enough to be undone. You gather your hair, now clinging to your cheeks and neck, and wipe your forehead with the back of your wrist. The room applauds. Not wildly, not formally, just enough to say they saw you, and they won't forget it soon. You step back into your shoes, retie your shawl, and sit down with your heart still thudding in your ears. Someone hands you another drink. This time, you don't spill it either. Your skirt settles, your breath steadies, and the night goes on, changed just a little by the way you move through it. It's the kind of morning that smells like baked apples and damp wool. The air is soft with mist, the kind that creeps along the edges of things but never quite settles. You've just finished sweeping your front step, satisfied by the clean crescent of stone revealed beneath the leaves, when Tom approaches with that look on his face, the one he wears when he's rehearsed something in his head and still doesn't know if it will work. He clears his throat and says, "They're short a pair of hands down at the granary. Figured you might be able to help load the sacks, just for a bit." You rest the broom against the door frame and cross your arms, slowly. Tom is sturdy and well-meaning and entirely too used to people saying yes, out of habit, out of politeness, out of wanting to be seen as agreeable. You give him a long look, not unkind, but entirely deliberate. "No," you say lightly, "but I hope it all gets done." He blinks. Not because he's offended, just surprised. You didn't shout or scowl or offer excuses about your back or your other chores. You said it with the same tone you'd use to comment on the weather. Final. Clear. Then you smile. Small. Slow. The kind that makes people rethink what they thought they knew. Tom scratches the back of his neck. Well, right. I suppose we'll manage. I'm sure you will. You thank him for thinking of you and ask about his mother's foot, which got caught in a rabbit hole last week. By the time he leaves, he looks almost grateful, and you haven't lifted a single sack of grain. Later, at the market, it happens again. The baker's cousin gestures toward a basket of misshapen rolls and says, "These aren't quite right. You can take them, if you like." "No, thank you," you say, adjusting your basket on your hip. "But they'd make fine crumbs for the hens, wouldn't they?" He looks startled, then thoughtful. By the time you've reached the herb stall, he's called after you to offer a slice of plum cake wrapped in waxed cloth. "You might as well," he says, sheepish. Too soft for the road, too sweet for the priest. You accept it with a nod and walk on. No need to point out that you didn't say yes. Just no, and a smile, and somehow the plum cake made it into your hands anyway. You've learned that a soft no holds more weight than a loud one. You've learned that people want to be around those who aren't afraid to draw lines because lines give shape to things. You say no when it's not your job, when it's not your burden, when someone else can and should do it instead. You say no when your feet are tired, when your patience is thinner than your apron string, when you'd rather sit by the fire and watch the cat chase shadows. And still, somehow, they bring you the good apples. They invite you first. They slice the second to last piece of pie and then slide the last one onto your plate without asking. They look to you not because you always agree, but because you know when not to. That evening, at the end of a small gathering you hadn't planned to attend but wandered into anyway, someone offers you the last spoonful of honey custard. You start to shake your head, just out of habit. But then you see the way they're watching you, hopeful and teasing. You raise a brow. "I really shouldn't," you say, voice light as breath. They grin and place it in your hand anyway. "You deserve it more than I do." You take it. Of course you do. You enjoy every bite with the satisfaction of someone who understands her own boundaries, who says no when she means it, and yes when it suits her. The custard is sweet and soft and perfectly cold, and no one expects you to do the dishes. The nobles arrived 3 days ago, and the village has not known peace since. They came with banners and trunks and 2 carts full of things no one needs. Spun glass goblets, velvet cushions, enough silver cutlery to feed 50 people without ever washing a single spoon. The footman trampled the vegetable patch behind the inn. One of the ladies' maids tried to pay for soap with a piece of blue ribbon, as if that were currency. And the count's steward demanded the largest bed in the village, even though he stands barely taller than your shoulder and smells like spoiled vinegar. They are everywhere, floating through the square in brocade cloaks and high collars, pointing at things as if naming them is a favor. They order honey water and then send it back because it tastes too much like honey. They ask where the theater is, as if one might rise from the earth just to please them. They ride their horses too fast near the children, and then complain when someone's laundry startles the animals. And you, well, you're only human. You keep your tone innocent as you ask whether the countess's headdress is meant to look like a swan or if that's just the unfortunate shape it took in the heat. When her attendant frowns, you widen your eyes and offer to adjust it yourself. You say you've always admired barnyard elegance. At the spinning circle, you recount how the Baron's youngest son fell off his own horse while trying to bow at the same time. A rare skill, you say, pretending to mean it, to fail so thoroughly at 2 things at once. The laughter bubbles up before you've finished. Branwen snorts. Old Hilda claps once and says she hasn't laughed that hard since the chimney caught fire and put itself out in the rain. Even the widow Pell, who rarely smiles, has to turn away to hide the curl of her lips. You keep going, not to be cruel, but because it's a release. Their self-importance begs for a pin, and you are not the only one holding a needle. Later, at the market, you hear a fishmonger explaining to a red-faced steward that no, trout cannot be embroidered to match the Duchess's dinner linens. And you nearly collapse behind the cider stall, trying to hide your grin. You ask the baker if he'll be selling bread shaped like miniature castles now, and he deadpans, only if they pay in miniature gold. By afternoon, half the village has taken up the game. A new song floats through the square, sung in a high, delicate falsetto that mimics the countess's way of asking if the cows could be moved to improve the view from her window. Someone carves a pigeon out of turnip and sets it on a plate outside the inn. It vanishes within the hour. You don't hate the nobles. Not really. You understand they live in a different world, one padded by coin and courtesies and expectations they did not choose. But you also understand how exhausting it is to be quiet when someone tramples your floor and then critiques your rug. So you offer release, wrapped in wit, dipped in sugar, and just enough vinegar to sting. That evening, as the sun slinks low behind the steeple, you find yourself outside the tavern with a group of villagers and 3 empty cider jugs. Someone dares you to do the voice again. You straighten your back, lift your chin, and flutter your hands like wings. Oh dear. You lilt, channeling silk and oblivion. Are these potatoes? How terribly provincial. The crowd erupts. Even the blacksmith chokes on his drink. You bow, low and graceful, and someone hands you a slice of leftover plum tart in tribute. From across the square, one of the noble attendants watches you with narrowed eyes. You meet his gaze and smile just slightly, enough to make him question what he thought he heard. You are not mean. You are merely precise. And you never say anything that isn't true. Not out loud. Not unless it's far too much fun not to. The fire crackles and shifts, throwing ribbons of light across the stone floor as another log gives way with a soft collapse. It's warm here, at the heart of the inn, where the smoke curls upward in lazy spirals and the scent of ash clings sweetly to wool and hair and the undersides of your sleeves. You're seated on the low 3-legged stool the innkeeper brought out just for you. Not because you asked, but because someone always does. The moment you step through the door, shoulders dusted with wind and cheeks pink from the night air, a space clears near the hearth, and the stool appears like a summons. You don't sit like someone waiting to be entertained. You sit like someone who knows the room is already listening. One foot tucked beneath you, one hand cradling a cider cup, the other gesturing loosely as you finish the end of a tale about the miller's cart and the goose who refused to ride in it without a bonnet. Laughter breaks out before the punchline even lands. The punchline itself makes someone wheeze into their drink. You don't perform exactly. You speak the way you might if you were just telling one friend a story over stew. But you know how to tilt your voice, when to drop into a hush that pulls people forward in their seats, when to raise it just enough to cut through a clatter of mugs, or the barkeep's shout at the dog. The room doesn't belong to you, technically, but right now, it feels like it does. Outside, the wind picks up. Rain dances against the shutters in soft bursts, the kind of sound that makes people grateful they stayed late. The benches closest to the hearth are packed, knees brushing knees, elbows overlapping. Someone sits on the floor with their back against the wall, and the boy who usually sweeps the entry is perched on the windowsill, eyes wide and mouth open. You glance at him once, during a pause, and see he hasn't blinked in far too long. Tonight, it's stories. Old ones, twisted ones, half-true ones. You recount the tale of the cursed rooster who crowed lies until the village voted him mayor. You share the legend of the traveling tinker who fixed pots with nothing but a song and a piece of string, and who left behind 5 children and a goat that no one ever figured out how to feed. You offer riddles in between, letting the crowd guess and argue and bicker until someone gets close enough, and you reward them with a wink and a refill. You never claim to be the smartest in the room, but you don't have to. What you are is the most practiced, the most unshaken. You know the value of a pause. You know how to stretch a moment until it snaps into laughter or falls gently into quiet. You know how to ask just the right question and then let it hang, letting someone else answer and feel clever for it. At one point, someone says, "Tell us the one about the hedge, witch, and the bear." You raise a brow and sip your cider. You want the clean version, or the one with the honey and the scandal? A cheer rises for scandal, naturally, and you launch in without missing a beat. You don't notice when the hour gets late. You don't need to. You can feel it in the slow softening of limbs, in the way the room leans inward more than out, in the long exhales and the empty mugs set down with gentle taps instead of clinks. The innkeeper doesn't rush anyone. He knows these nights are good for business and better for spirit. Eventually, your voice quiets. Not because you've run out of stories, but because the room has had its fill for now. You finish your cider and set the cup down, and no one rushes to replace it. The laughter lingers like smoke. You didn't bring a throne. You didn't need one. You stand in front of the baker's stall, the late sun slanting through the leaves overhead and warming the back of your neck. The loaves are still warm, their crusts golden and cracked just right, smelling of rosemary and roasted garlic and a hint of something sweet. You point to the one at the far end, the round one with the flour-dusted top and the faintest spiral pattern baked into it like a secret. The baker's daughter wraps it in a cloth and hands it over with the ease of someone who knows the rhythm of your hunger. "That'll be 4 coppers, she says, not quite smiling, but close. You nod, shifting the loaf to the crook of your arm. You don't reach for a coin pouch. You don't rummage through a basket or untie a drawstring from your belt. Instead, you look her square in the eye, lift your chin slightly, and slip your hand into the neckline of your dress. It's not dramatic. It doesn't have to be. Your fingers find the small hidden fold just inside your bodice, stitched by your own hand, neat and discreet and perfectly placed. You press against the cloth and feel the thin disc of metal, still cool despite the heat of your body. With a flick and a practiced curl of your thumb, you draw the coin out between your fingers and hold it up like an offering or a dare. The baker's daughter raises an eyebrow. "Every time," she mutters. Like you conjured it from nowhere. You drop the coin into her hand and grin. Nowhere is a relative term. Behind you, someone snorts. It's old Bram, leaning on his walking stick and watching like he expects you to pull a rabbit from your boot next. You offer him a wink, and he chuckles into his beard. You've never needed a purse. Purses jangle and flap and tempt fate. You've seen too many girls lose theirs in a crowd or have them sliced clean off by a thief's clever blade. No thank you. You'd rather keep your coin where it can't be taken, where it rests against your ribs with the steadiness of breath and heartbeat. When you need it, it's there. When you don't, you forget it's even with you. Until someone asks for payment, and then, like magic, it appears. You walk back through the market, loaf in hand, humming under your breath. A boy offers you a pear for a smile, and you take it with a nod, knowing full well he'll brag about it later like it was something rarer than gold. You pass a woman counting eggs and another haggling over a bolt of cloth, both of them weighed down by coin pouches, clinking with every move. You walk lighter, freer. Everything you need is close at hand. Later that day, in front of the smithy, you pull a second coin from the same secret fold. This one larger, a little worn at the edges. A gift from a cousin who traded silk for silver on the coast and told no one how. You offer it to the apprentice in exchange for fixing the blade on your kitchen knife. He eyes the coin, then you, then nods like he's seen enough. "Do you keep a whole chest in there?" he asks, half teasing. "Just the essentials," you reply. "Flour, flint, and the odd golden goose." He laughs, and you walk away before he can ask what that means. Better to leave them guessing. That night, when the house is quiet and the fire is low, you reach into your bodice again, not for payment, but for the tiny copper charm you keep tucked beside the coins, the one shaped like a crescent moon. It's not worth anything by weight, but it feels good in your palm. You press it to your lips before tucking it back into place, safe between fabric and skin. You don't have pockets. You don't need them. She's leaning over a wash tub when you see her, sleeves pushed up to her elbows, hands deep in a sea of suds, hair falling loose from the knot at the base of her neck. There's a smudge of soap on her cheek, and her brow is creased in concentration, but she's humming, off-key and loud, some nonsense rhyme you haven't heard since you were 10. The sun hits her at an angle that turns the strands of her hair to burnished copper, and you stop just for a second and think, well, would you look at that? You don't say anything right away. You take your time crossing the yard, basket on your hip, enjoying the way her tune drifts in and out, the way she doesn't notice you watching. There's something in the way she works, determined, but not rushed, that reminds you of women who've learned to stop apologizing for how much space they take up. She looks up as you approach, brushing her forearm across her forehead and leaving a pale streak behind. "I thought that was you," she says, smiling wide. "You're the only one who walks like the ground," owes her an explanation. You snort. "You're the only one who can say that and still make it sound like a compliment." "I try," she says, straightening. She stretches her back, groans, and gives the wash tub a hard glance. "The soap's winning today. I think it's organizing a mutiny." You set your basket down on the bench and shake your head. You shouldn't be allowed to look that good while doing battle with laundry. It's unnatural. She blinks, then laughs, really laughs, sharp and bright, like cracked ice falling into a cup of cider. It catches her off guard. You can tell by the way she covers her mouth with one hand and stares at you like you've spoken in a language she wasn't expecting to hear. "I'm serious," you say. "That hair of yours is ridiculous. I'd trade half my pantry for it." "Stop," she says, but she's still smiling, her face turning a little pink. "It's a mess. It's a glorious mess. And don't get me started on your smile. I'd bottle it if I could." She shakes her head, still not used to being admired out loud. She's been looked at, certainly, and talked about, maybe even envied, but not like this. Not with gentleness. Not without conditions. You can see it in the way her shoulders shift, loosening, like she's slowly realizing there's no punchline coming, no sly twist behind your words. "You laugh like you mean it," you add, softer now. "Like the joy isn't borrowed." She looks down, and then back up. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me since, I don't even know when." "Well, it's true." You say it plainly. Not with fanfare, not with exaggeration, just truth, spoken like it's not a rare thing, even though you both know it is. She brushes her hair back, straightens her apron, and stands taller than before. Not because she's pretending, but because something has shifted in her. Just enough to lift her chin a touch higher, square her shoulders a bit more, like your words wrapped around her, and stayed. "Thank you," she says, voice low but steady. "That means more than you think." You shrug, but your chest is warm, not from the sun, but from the simple satisfaction of seeing someone glow under the weight of kindness. Compliments are not currency. You didn't give one to get one, but they are power, and you've learned that lifting another woman doesn't make you any smaller. It only makes the world a little bigger for both of you. She returns to the wash tub with a grin that sticks, and you walk away, knowing she'll hum a different tune now, one with her head a little higher. It began at the bread table, as many things do. He was slicing too thick, and she was reaching too far, and your elbow just happened to steer his plate into her path. Their hands bumped. She apologized first, quick and flustered, and he muttered something about crusts and balance, like he hadn't spoken to a woman since harvest. You watched her glance down at her feet and him stare at her braid like it held some kind of spell. You smiled to yourself and nudged the pitcher of cider closer to where they stood, just within her reach, just beyond his. Later, when everyone was gathering at the long tables under the canopy of lanterns and moonlight, you made certain there was a space beside you on one side and a seat across from you on the other. Then you stepped aside at just the right moment and offered it to her, with a smile that made it seem accidental. He followed, because of course he did, holding her plate like he had something to prove. He sat across from her and looked startled when he realized she'd been placed there deliberately. You sipped your drink and said nothing. It didn't take long. She laughed at something that wasn't quite a joke, and he looked stunned by the sound, like he'd never heard anything so bright. She tucked her hair behind her ear, 3 times in one conversation, by your count, and he managed not to stare every single time, though his ears turned red at the tips. You kept the talk going just enough to keep it light, to give them space to speak and listen, and forget there were others nearby. By the time the meat pies arrived, he was leaning forward on his elbows, and she was toying with the ribbon at her wrist, and you knew you'd done it right. You've always had the knack. It's not magic, though people have called it that. It's just knowing which voices will echo well together, which silences stretch wide enough to hold both curiosity and comfort. You've watched enough people fold themselves up for the wrong partners. Quiet girls forced into noise, gentle boys trying to wear anger like armor, but not these two. They're like leaves that drift toward each other in the same breeze, not rushed, just inevitable. He tells her about his grandmother's orchard, how the pears came late this year, how one tree only fruits on odd-numbered seasons and no one knows why. She listens like he's explaining the stars. When she speaks of her younger brother, the one who keeps getting into the flour barrel, his face softens in a way that's hard to fake. You catch their eyes meeting between bites, the flicker and hold, the way his fingers start mimicking the shape of hers on the table. You lean back and let them speak. The music begins later, soft and distant, and the torches throw golden shapes across the grass. Someone taps your shoulder and asks if you want to dance, but you shake your head and gesture toward your feet as if they ache, which they don't. Not really. You just want to see what happens next. She stands first, brushing crumbs from her skirt, and he rises, as if tied to her by a thread. You don't say anything, but when she hesitates near the edge of the dancing space, you catch her eye and raise your eyebrows. Go on. She does. They dance like people who've just realized their limbs are meant to move together. Not perfectly, but without apology. He laughs when they nearly stumble, and she grins wide and careless, like she's never had a reason not to. They don't look at anyone else. You finish your cider and fold your hands in your lap. You didn't meddle. You just gave them a nudge in the right direction and let the rest unfold. They'll remember the way their hands found each other under lantern light. They'll remember the pie, the song, the tilt of the moon. And maybe, just maybe, they'll remember that you sat quietly nearby, smiling like someone who knew exactly how it would all turn out. The light is fading outside, slipping away behind the edge of the barn and the bend in the path. The sky is still streaked with lavender and smoke, but the air through the window carries the kind of chill that means the hearth will need stoking before long. You've finished your chores, stacked the last of the dried mint, folded the linens, turned the stew to its lowest simmer, and for once, there's no knock at the door. No cousin in need of stitching, no runaway chicken demanding to be chased through brambles. You take the silence for what it is, a gift. The candle waits on the little table by the wall, stubby and familiar, smelling faintly of beeswax and thyme. You light it carefully, shielding the flickering flame with one hand like you're whispering a secret to it. The wick catches, steady and golden. You settle into your chair, the one with the uneven leg and the cushion that still holds the shape of your hips, and reach under the table for the book. It isn't fancy. It's hand-bound, a little crooked at the spine, its cover worn soft where your thumb always presses. The pages are uneven, browned at the edges, dog-eared in defiance of any tidy instincts. Some are smudged with ink, and others with flour, and one corner still smells faintly of lavender after you left it near a sachet last summer. It doesn't matter. It's yours. You open to the first page, and the familiar script greets you like an old friend. The letters loop and lean, rushed in some places, careful in others. You know the shape of them better than the back of your own hand. The margins are cluttered with your notes, little arrows and stars, underlined words, and the occasional heart drawn when a line struck you just right. You don't need to read it all. You've memorized entire passages. But still, There's something about seeing the words again, letting your eyes travel the path they've traveled 100 times, that feels like coming home. You read slowly, not out of caution, but reverence. The heroine still makes the same choices. The twist still arrives too soon and too perfectly. The part where the soldier returns from the sea with a song stitched into the lining of his coat still makes your chest ache. And when the lovers part at the old stone bridge, you still feel it, right beneath your ribs, like a familiar bruise. You pause there, fingers resting in the gutter of the page, thumb rubbing the edge of a line you've underlined twice. "I would rather miss you forever," the woman says, "than love anyone else by half." You close your eyes. It's a simple story, really. A love that doesn't last in the way people want it to, but lingers longer than anyone expected. A garden that grows out of spite and sorrow. A friendship born out of one shared secret and kept alive through letters that never arrived. It's messy. It's beautiful. And it reminds you, every single time, that you are allowed to feel everything and still be whole. You wipe a tear from your cheek before it falls onto the page. You always do. Not because you're ashamed, but because the paper is soft now, fragile from years of use, and you don't want your grief or joy to smudge the ink. By the time you reach the final chapter, the candle has burned lower. The wax pools at the base, thick and sweet-smelling, and the shadows in the room have grown taller, stretching out like sleepy cats. You read the last line out loud, just under your breath. And when the wind called her name, she answered, not with fear, but with laughter. You close the book gently, not because it's over, but because it never really is. You know you'll be back again. Maybe next week. Maybe tomorrow. It's the kind of story that stays with you, even after the candle's gone out. The house is quiet, the kind of quiet that only settles once the fire's banked low and every dish has been dried and stacked in its place. The air smells faintly of smoke and lavender, your favorite blend. You've tucked yourself into the corner of the table nearest the shuttered window, where the wood still holds the warmth from the afternoon sun, and the breeze that slips through the slats feels like a sigh. Your quill waits, sharpened and sure. The inkpot is half full, its lid unscrewed like an invitation. And in front of you, a single sheet of paper, clean and cream, colored, thick enough to absorb your thoughts without bleeding them through. You hesitate, not because you don't know what to write, but because the first word always feels like a breach, a crossing. You're not writing for an audience, not shaping something to be read or passed around or praised over stew and cider. This isn't meant for approval. This is just for you. That makes it sacred. The candle flickers, and you begin. The first line comes quickly, pulled from something you saw earlier, the way the wind lifted the edge of the laundry like it was trying to read the seams. You write that down. Not perfectly, not even elegantly, but it doesn't matter. This isn't about polish. It's about truth. You follow the thought where it leads. From wind to thread, from cloth to memory, from memory to longing. You don't name names. You never do. But the shape of a person rises between the lines. The way they laughed once, too loud and too bright. The way their hand brushed yours near the well. Not meaning to. Not really, but staying just a second too long. You catch yourself smiling and frown immediately, then smile again because no one's here to see it. No one will ever see any of this. That's the joy of it. You write about the color of rain. Not gray, not blue, but something softer, something that doesn't have a name. You write about silence, how it isn't empty, just full of things we haven't said yet. You write about the moon, of course you do, because it looked at you tonight the way a friend does when they know you're lying but love you anyway. Your handwriting shifts as you go. The first lines are neat, careful, evenly spaced. By the time you reach the middle, the ink flows faster. The loops of your letters widen. Your thoughts chase each other across the page. There's a smear at the bottom corner where your finger brushed against a still wet phrase, maybe your favorite one, and now it's slightly blurred, like a secret underwater. You don't bother crossing it out. When the final line comes, it arrives with a kind of quiet relief. Not because you're finished, but because the part of you that needed to say something has been heard. You sit back and stretch your fingers. Rub the pad of your thumb where the pen pressed hardest. You don't reread it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You've learned that some things lose their magic under too much scrutiny. You wait for the ink to dry. Then, without folding the page, without marking it in any way, you slip it between the pages of an old herbal tucked on the shelf, somewhere no one else would think to look. Not because the poem is dangerous, not because it's shameful, but because it's yours. Only yours. You blow out the candle and sit in the dark for a minute longer, letting the quiet fill the space where the poem used to be. It's still there, of course, but now it lives in two places, on the page and inside you. That's more than enough. The house has gone still, the last of the embers tucked beneath the ash, the shutters closed, and the floor swept clean of all but memory. Even the cat has curled into the crook of a chair, tail flicking once before it stills. You step quietly through the door and onto the porch, careful not to let it creak. The night is wide and waiting. Above you, the moon hangs low and full, silver like spilled milk, wide as a saucer, and almost too bright to look at directly. The stars have taken a step back tonight, content to let her have the stage. You wrap your shawl a little tighter around your shoulders and walk out into the yard, past the empty buckets, past the garden now hushed and furrowed, until you reach the fence where the earth softens and the sky opens. It's here you stop, resting your elbows on the worn top rail, your eyes turned upward. "Hello, love," you murmur, and you mean it. You don't expect her to answer. She never has. But you like the shape of the words, the way they roll gently out of your mouth, carried by breath and nothing more. You imagine she likes hearing them, even if she keeps her silence. You've always believed that some friends are the quiet kind, the ones who just sit beside you, who listen, who never need to fill the space to make it sacred. You take a breath, deep and slow, and let your thoughts unwind in the hush. Today was full. Good, mostly. A tangled thread of small victories and unnoticed weariness. You remember the laughter around the fire, the smile you coaxed from the shy new girl with the thick braid and calloused hands. You remember the pie that didn't burn, the kind word from the merchant who never smiles, the little girl who handed you a leaf and called it a treasure. But you also remember the ache in your knees, the scrape on your palm, the moment you almost snapped at someone you love. "I did my best," you whisper. It's not a confession, just a truth, laid bare for the stars. The moon says nothing, but her light catches in your hair, slides down the curve of your cheek, rests warm against your collarbone. It's as close to a reply as you'll get. You find yourself talking more as the minutes slip by. You tell her about the dream you had last night, the one where you were walking across a frozen lake that never cracked, even when you danced. You tell her about the letter you want to write but haven't, about the words that keep catching in your throat, about the way the world feels too heavy some days and impossibly soft on others. You ask her if she ever tires of watching us, if she's bored of our mistakes, our dramas, our endless hunger for more. She doesn't blink. She doesn't flinch. She just glows. You lean your head against your arms and close your eyes for a moment. The night smells like thyme and wood smoke, and something you can't name. Something old and kind, maybe, like the scent of pages turning in a book you've never read. You feel your chest loosen, just a little, your breath evening out. You let the silence stretch between you, comfortable now, familiar. Then, just before you turn to go, you whisper a wish. You don't say it loudly. You don't say it clearly. You don't need to. The words are small and tender, barely more than a heartbeat shaped into syllables. You don't even know if you believe it'll do anything. But there's a sweetness in the asking, a hope stitched into the air like thread through linen. You look up one last time and swear the moon smiles back. The last of the light has gone, but the sky isn't black. It's that deep, dusky blue that feels like velvet, thick with quiet and stars barely beginning to show. You step outside and close the door behind you, not slamming it, not sneaking out, just slipping away with the ease of someone who doesn't need to ask permission. The air hits your skin like a balm, cool and clean and edged with the scent of earth and chimney smoke. You inhale slowly, then let it go, the breath stretching long and full all the way down. The night wraps around you like an old shawl, one you didn't know you needed until it was already resting on your shoulders. It doesn't ask anything of you. Not your attention, not your effort, not even your smile. You don't have to be clever or charming or right. You don't have to explain the roughness in your voice, or the smudge on your apron, or the tired behind your eyes. You just get to be. The world is finally hushed, the chickens have settled, the wind has stopped trying to prove a point. Even the dog next door has given up barking at shadows. You sit down on the edge of the step, hands in your lap, and stare out into the dark yard where the garden lies sleeping, and the trees stand like patient watchmen. Your toes wiggle in your slippers, catching a little chill, but you don't go inside. It feels good to sit in the stillness, with nothing pressing in. Today wasn't perfect. You forgot the herbs in the stew, and had to pretend it was intentional. You mended a shirt only to find a new tear at the hem. You smiled through a conversation that drained you more than it filled. But somehow, none of that matters here. The air doesn't judge the day. The night doesn't ask for a tally of what you got right. It simply folds itself around you and says, "Here, rest." You tilt your face upward and feel the faint breath of stars against your cheeks. There's a beauty in this moment that no one else will witness. It's not grand or dramatic. It's not a story you'll retell. It's not even rare, but it is yours. A small sigh escapes you. Not one of defeat, not even exhaustion, just release. You didn't realize how tightly you'd been holding yourself until now, how much tension lived in your shoulders and the backs of your teeth. The night has a way of loosening knots you didn't notice forming. You are not waiting for anything, not for someone to find you, not for something to change, not for a thought to resolve. You are not hiding. You are not wishing to be elsewhere. You are simply here, breathing. And for once, that feels like enough. You lean back on your hands and look toward the trees. The leaves rustle once, barely audible, as if agreeing with your quiet. A moth flits through the light cast from your window, drawn to the glow but never quite settling. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls. Soft, brief, uninterested in being mysterious. It's all so ordinary, so peaceful. You smile, not for anyone, not even because you're happy in the way people mean when they say it, but because you feel solid. You feel full and quiet and untouched by any sharp edges. There's no grand revelation, no sudden insight, just a feeling in your chest, warm and slow and certain. You are okay. Not in the way people say when they're trying to sound brave, not in the way that hides bruises behind cheer, but in the way that means whole, held, unhurried. You stay like that for a long time, the night deepening around you, the stars growing bolder. You don't need to chase a single thing. You are not missing anything. Eventually, you'll rise. You'll brush the dirt from your hands and go back inside, into the house where your life waits, messy and ordinary and completely yours. But for now, you just breathe. And everything, impossibly, gently, is enough. The blanket is heavy in the best way, warm and weighty against your shoulders, smelling faintly of sun-dried linen and rosemary. You shift beneath it once, just enough to feel the softness of the sheets you laid fresh this morning. the ones that caught the wind while drying and now whisper of summer. The fire in the hearth has burned down to a low glow, the kind of embered orange that no longer tries to impress anyone. It simply exists. Content. Enough. The room is still. Not perfectly silent, but familiarly so. The distant creak of beams settling, the occasional rustle of the tree outside brushing its leaves against the shutters, and your own breath. Slow and even now, as if it's already halfway into the world of sleep without waiting for the rest of you. Your body hums with the gentle fatigue that only comes after a day well spent. Not perfect, not effortless, but true. The kind of day that ends with tired feet and a full heart. Your thoughts drift, not anxiously, not in loops. They wander like children through a field, barefoot and slow, grazing against half-formed memories and loose plans with no urgency. You picture the way the honey tasted on warm bread this morning, the laughter that shook the kitchen walls when you spilled flour on your skirt, the girl in the village who hugged you so tight your ribs ached. You didn't need to do anything heroic. You just showed up. And somehow, that was more than enough. Your fingers curl beneath the edge of the blanket, anchoring you gently. You smile, soft and small, for no one but yourself. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything feels real. The kind of real you'd always hoped for. Messy and quiet and brimming with color. You don't dream of carriages or crowns, not tonight. There are no velvet gowns or jeweled thrones waiting in your mind. What comes instead is laughter. Warm, unfiltered laughter. The kind that bubbles up around a table after the candles have burned low. The kind that shakes your shoulders and makes your eyes crinkle and steals the breath right out of your chest. You dream of bare feet on wooden floors, of running through meadows not to flee but just because you can. You dream of voices calling your name not with orders but with delight, with invitation. There's dancing too. Not formal, not rehearsed, but wild. Loose hair, swinging skirts, a hand catching yours, and spinning you around in a room lit by firelight and joy. Someone tosses a dried flower crown onto your head, and you wear it like a queen, not of anything but your own happiness. In the dream, you don't need to be small or quiet or careful. You take up space. You speak loudly. You throw your head back when you laugh and don't cover your mouth. You sing out of tune, and no one minds. You spill cider on the hem of your dress and kick off your shoes so you can keep dancing. You are not being watched or judged or measured. You are simply being, and you are beloved. Even asleep, your lips part slightly with a smile, the echo of joy following you beneath the covers. You shift again, not to escape the waking world, but to tuck deeper into this sense of belonging, of safety, of enoughness. The fire dims a little more. Outside, the wind slips past the shutters with a sigh. Inside, you dream, not of rescue or riches, but of freedom, of your own life, cracked and radiant, waiting for you to wake again. You sleep like someone who has nothing to prove and everything to look forward to.